Welcome to those of you joining. We'll go ahead and get started in a couple minutes. Welcome everybody. Go ahead and, if you don't mind, drop where you're calling in from in the chat, just so we can welcome everybody, and we'll go ahead and get started around 2:05 Eastern time. I don't know times when everybody's at, but about 4 to 5 minutes. Summit County. It's beautiful there. It's one of my favorite places.
Where's that, did you say?
It's it's kind of along the I-70 corridor, a little bit off it, just some towns and cities in Colorado, central Colorado, relatively higher elevation in the mountains.
It's either steamingly hot or there's a forest fire. From not that area where you're talking about.
Hopefully not right now. I know they got a lot of rain, so, or Denver at least got a lot of rain, so. Welcome. See a couple more people joining. Go ahead and drop where you're calling from in the chat, and we'll go ahead and get started in about 3 minutes. All right, it looks like the attendee list has started to slow to a trickle, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to introduce everyone to Meg Bernard, who is our VP of Development at Food Rescue Hero, and Danielle DeWitt, who is our Senior Development Manager at 412 Food Rescue. I am now going to mute myself and take myself camera and let both of you take it away. So thanks so much for presenting.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having us. This is really exciting to get to share some of what we've been thinking about and learning about with this crew. I know there's a lot of really great minds out there, so it's really good to lead a discussion and something that's super important. So yeah, as Jake said, I'm Danielle DeWitt, the Senior Development Manager at 412 Food Rescue, and I've been here for about 2 years now. Mostly focusing on individual giving. So joined here by my supervisor, Meg Bernard, who will be sharing a little bit. We'll be dual presenting this webinar. So you'll hear from her in a little bit. So yeah, today's webinar is all about how to balance your fundraising plate. So just making sure that, with the financial times and uncertainty coming ahead, just making sure that the money that you're bringing in is staying, consistent and healthy so that we can continue to do the important work that we're doing. Oh, sorry, just a few reminders before we jump into that. Drop your questions in the Q&A as we go along. Jake will help monitor that. Just to make sure that we answer any questions that you may have. And also just a reminder that a recording of this presentation will be emailed in the next couple of days to all of the attendees and registrants. And then during the presentation, some of the links that will be provided will be a request to have a follow-up meeting with Jake, a link to register for August's webinar, and of course the upcoming Food Rescue Conference in October of this year. Some more information on that and some tickets. Super exciting opportunity to learn more about fundraising and all kinds of food rescue information. So definitely check that out. So diving right in, we want to talk a little bit about diversifying funding and why it's important. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's super important to avoid depending on one stream of fundraising sources in case it dries up. Relying heavily on one stream, like a single major donor or a government grant, puts the organization at risk. And just making sure that you have a healthy mixture will enable your organization to continue to do the important work that you're doing. And making sure that you have the right mix of the important aspects will create more stability and security in the future. So what the ideal funding breakdown is really dependent on your organization. It depends on, your goals and your strategic plans that you have for your future. But a ballpark kind of estimate from the experts says that, no more than 25% of your organizational income should come from one single source. And, those sources typically include foundations, corporations, individuals, government, and then we kind of have this other category of events and more. So making sure that one of those does not supply more than 25% of your organizational income. So one, excuse me, let me just gather my thoughts for a second. So once you've figured out that ideal funding mixture, what we're going to be talking about mostly in this presentation is how to maintain each of those categories in that mixture. And a lot of that is depending on knowing your audience, knowing what part of that breakdown is that you're talking to. So for example, if you're talking to a funder or a foundation versus an individual, you need to know, do they care more about the qualitative analysis or the quantitative, emotional, heart-tugging storytelling part of it? But throughout all of these categories, relationship building is the key. So we're going to be talking a little bit about each of those categories and how to build and maintain your relationships with them based off of what are their needs, and how can you both collaborate to work towards a partnership that can benefit your organization. As I mentioned, so the four major sources of income for a nonprofit is individual giving, foundations, corporations, and government, and then the events and other items as well. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some things that I've learned recently about individual giving and things that we can keep in mind to ensure that we grow that source of income to maintain that healthy plate. So recently, the Giving USA annual report was released for the year 2022, and truthfully, it doesn't look great. The outlook doesn't look great. There's a lot of trends that are a little bit alarming that we just need to pay attention to and kind of think about and adjust some of our activities and really lean into the trends that are showing what is working so that we can continue to make sure that that piece of the pie or that piece of the plate stays strong. So just some of the highlights from that report is that individual giving does continue to lead overall in the mixture of that plate of resources of funding, but it is declining. Another trend that is worth mentioning is that dollars are up, but donors are down. So the amount of fundraising that is coming in from individuals is increasing, but the donors are down, meaning that not as many people are contributing. Another point that they made is that first-time donors are 2 times more likely to continue giving if they are engaged, and alternative ways of giving are creating emerging trends. So these are 4 really important key takeaways when you're thinking about how to keep that piece of the pie of the individual givers engaged and contributing to your organization. So that was actually reports from the 2021 year. The Fundraising Effectiveness Project just did a report for Q4 of 2022, and the outlook is actually a little less positive than 2021. So they are showing a decline in individual giving by 10%. And over the past decade, donations, I mentioned that already, that donations have increased, but donors have declined. And it looks like that the leading cause of donor decline is coming from a reduction in new donors. And so, yeah, this is just some more information about the trends of individual giving and things that we need to pay attention to. And some of the things that we can do to combat that are to focus on certain segments or people in the individual giving aspect. So major donors are a big focus because of that, that trend of the dollars are up, but the donors are down, or the dollars are down, donors are down. Sorry. So it's just making sure that you are paying attention to the folks that are, sharing the biggest piece of that pie and really cultivating that and making sure that they're staying engaged. And really that's about focusing on having authentic relationships with them, really getting to know your donors and talking with them and understanding what their needs are so that you can provide fulfilling that need with them. And also, we had mentioned that alternative gift options are becoming a new trend as well. And so most of your major donors are going to be interested in doing that. Things such as donor advised funds, planned giving, stock options, things like that. And just a little tip for that is to make sure that you have it available on all of the information available on your website, because you do want to make giving as easy as possible for not just your major donors, but all donors. One of the other areas that we wanted to talk about was our new donors. So as we mentioned, one of the trends is that, there is a decline in new donors. However, peer-to-peer giving is a great way to attract new donors. And a lot of that peer-to-peer giving can be generated from your Gen Zers. So this young generation, they are feisty, they are looking to get involved, they are looking to make a difference, but they really value authenticity, and they really look for that on community, on an online community. So really you want to focus your communications on all the social channels that they're on and being as authentic as possible. And one way of doing that is through this influencer strategy. So really, getting real with sharing who you are and what you care about online, and partnering with other individuals, other Gen Zers, giving them the microphone to really tell their story about why they care about it, and giving them, creative freedom and autonomy to make a difference. The ask with Gen Zers is to, get involved and become a fundraiser and help spread that word to garner more support, rather than become a donor. And so that kind of leads into this other trend of, it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that peer-to-peer giving, is really a great way to attract those new donors, to ensure that, you're kind of bolstering your individual giving portion of the plate. So one thing to keep in mind when you're using your Gen Zers to do your fundraising for you is that once you get those new donors, you want to make sure that you know which door they came in. You don't just want to add them to your emailing list and just pretend like they've been there the whole time or know anything about your organization. You want to know which door they came through. So something as simple as, hey, we know you care about such and such, so-and-so, let us tell you more about the cause that they care about, and kind of engage them that way. And by engaging them that way and showing them that you know who you are, you're creating an authentic relationship, you're starting that engagement, and then your ability to maintain them as an owner increases. And other ways to engage donors and attract them and to be more authentic is to incorporate this concept of AI. I know that everybody, it seems like, is talking about AI and what it means for the future of fundraising and the future of everything in general. But one thing to keep in mind is that data and AI is going to be an essential tool for us, but it's truly the storytelling and the incorporation of the data and AI with who you are and your authenticity and your individual stories that will make a huge difference in engaging and keeping those new donors and your older and major donors. Part of that is because humans remember stories at 22 times the rate of just straight facts. So making sure that you're really pulling on the heartstrings and getting to the whys of what the work that you're doing. I went to a conference recently, and there is an example of an organization who decided to go away with the traditional fundraising positions, and they got rid of segmenting by amounts. They don't do direct mail. They actually hired journalists. So they have journalists now that are just working to tell the story of their mission and sharing it that way, which I thought was super interesting. Yeah, so this is just an example of one that 412 Food Rescue did in the past, really highlighting the positivity of the mission of the organization, realizing that food rescue isn't just about the hardships that we're overcoming. It's about creating a positive experience from start to finish and giving that warm, fuzzy feeling, and just showing all of the positive aspects that food rescue does from start to finish. So yeah, those are just some some of the trends that are happening in individual giving, and some of the things, little tips and tricks that we can do to make sure that this piece of the plate stays balanced. And happy to answer any questions or make any clarifications later on. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Meg Bernard, who will talk a little bit more about some other pieces of the plate, and starting with foundation.
Great, Danielle, thank you very much. You had some great tips in there. And I'm going to repeat some of them through all the resources that I'll be discussing in my section here. And that is to know your audience and build relationships. That's going to be the key to fundraising across all your segments, I believe. So I'm going to be talking about foundation giving, corporate giving, government sources, and special events. And then how do you put it all together, put all the sources together in one plan that's going to work for you. I think one of the first things, and I'm going to talk about foundations right now, is how do you identify your possible funders? There are two ways you can do it, and depends on your focus. If you're looking in your own community, it really depends on each state and city and locality of where you are, what kind of resources that are available to find your local funders. Often at the local library, there will be a foundation center. I know we have one in Pittsburgh, and often libraries will maintain a directory of donors. Another way to find out about who's giving where is to always look at donor lists of other organizations. Let's say you go to the symphony, they give you the booklet, and at the back of the booklet, there's always a listing of donors. Or look online at annual reports of other organizations. That can also give you some clues, particularly looking at other organizations that are similar to yours, because you'll find interested funders there. On the national side, there's a directory called Candid's Foundation Directory. It is not inexpensive, I will say that. I honestly don't remember offhand how much it is, but I think it might be as more than $1,000, and that's for a whole year. Now that will depend whether you want to sign on to something like that and download all the details that you can get from that. There are different levels of entry with the directory, and obviously when you pay for the higher amount, you're getting more data. But there's some of the free aspects of it are available, and that might help you at least in your initial search with national funders. And you can also look at local funders too with the foundation directory. Always look, when you're looking at new foundations or current foundations, you always want to make sure you have a mission and vision fit. That's the same thing as knowing your audience, building relationships. You want to make sure you're barking up the right tree and that you're going to have a response that is in line with what your organization's goals are. And you also might, when you do get in touch in front of a funder, and maybe it's a new funder, don't have just one idea in mind. You might want to have a couple of programs to propose for funding. And I would also say when you get a meeting, always try and get a meeting with the foundation officer, but be sure to listen to them. Get their advice on the project or not that you might want to look at. But I think it's really important for you, one, to not be a talking head in a meeting, so to speak. You want to really make sure that you're listening to the funder so that you can respond appropriately. With large foundations, you might want to consider asking for multi-year grants. It's a great way to provide solid income for the future that you can look to and depend on. For smaller foundations, maybe ones that give $5,000, $1,000, please just consider with your organization what giving level is worth your time and effort to apply for. Some larger organizations may not consider it worth their time to pursue foundations that get $5,000, whereas if you're a smaller foundation, smaller organization, then that is definitely an approach you would want to take.
Meg, just to interrupt, it's a little hard to hear you. Are you able to mute Danielle and turn the volume on for yourself? that would be super helpful.
All right. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, how's this?
That's good. Thanks.
Are we good now? Is that better, Jake?
We're good. Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. These slides will be shared with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you had a hard time hearing on that foundation slide. Okay, now with corporations, corporate giving in general is on the rise, and corporate social responsibility is really where this is the sweet spot for corporate giving. The types of corporate giving are anything from matching gifts to volunteer grants, and volunteer grants are where a volunteer, an employee of, say, Bell South, may volunteer at your organization. They may, of their own volition, go and request a grant from their employer. And in many cases, employers do have grant programs like that set up within their organizations. Also, corporations in their giving arm do community grants as well. And of course, event sponsorship is another popular area for corporate giving. And why do businesses practice philanthropy? It's really about a lot of different things, and it's about being a good corporate citizen, first and foremost. I think it fosters, and because corporations tend to get their employees involved by volunteering in organizations, it fosters employee engagement and positive work environment, as well as I mentioned before, it creates, enhances the public image of that business. And it shows the desire to do good and to have social responsibility. So again, as bringing up the same thing that we've been banging on, I know, is building authentic partnerships that go beyond the monetary contributions and align values. You want to be able, with your organization, to develop opportunities for corporations to get involved. Could you go back this one? Thank you. That's okay. So it's terrific to be able to develop volunteer and corporate engagement opportunities for groups of volunteers to come in and volunteer in your field, in your kitchen, if you're a food rescue organization, or have a pantry, have volunteers come in and come in as a group and do volunteer engagement. And corporations will often, actually, when you have those opportunities where volunteer groups come in, corporations will often, bring a check, they'll bring a check with you and make a modest contribution to your organization, anywhere from, I mean, we've seen experiences anywhere from $1 to under $5,000. And that's a great segue to asking for something further down the road as you continue to develop your relationship with that business. So how do you find out what local businesses have established corporate giving programs? That's not always a really easy thing to do. It's often housed in HR and marketing departments. And again, I think having, as Danielle mentioned, having opportunities on your website for individual giving, the same is true for corporate giving. If you have plenty of opportunities on your website listed for how individuals and businesses, or individuals from businesses, can be involved, that way businesses can find you in addition to you looking for businesses. Again, look for mission fit. And as I mentioned earlier, look at in foundations, this is true of corporations as well. Look at sponsors of other area nonprofits. If they have a fundraising event, most corporations will put the logos of those organizations on their website or on any kind of publicity about the event. So just always kind of be on the lookout of what other organizations are doing as well. You can invite us to a corporation to sponsor a major event you might be having, and be sure to use your board members as well, and any volunteer connections that you have that for individuals you know work for major corporations that can perhaps provide an entree for you. Now, here we are. We go into government. Government is really sort of an entirely different animal. Government funding, it's funded by tax dollars, so you can imagine there's stringent compliance and reporting that's required there. Government grant writing can be very labor intensive and competitive. And you want to make sure, if you're going to pursue government funding, make sure you have the infrastructure and bandwidth to pursue and implement that program. And additionally, professional grant writers are often a necessity with government grant writing. So how do you learn about government grant opportunities? And they're usually broader national opportunities, I might add. Although you may look at your local counties or cities to see if they have programs that are available there. But on the national level, the website, and many of you may be familiar with this already, of grants.gov, which is listed here on the slide, lists current opportunities of available grants. It's also, I think, important to develop relationships with your elected officials and state representatives, because they can assist you with identifying possible sources for discrete projects that you may have. So how else might we get support from outside sources? Special events, fundraising events. They're a lot of work. They can be fun, but you really want to take a deep look at how you're going to receive, what kind of income you're going to get from that, so that you realize, so that you're not wasting your time. Fundraising events can benefit a particular project or general support for your organization. And the income from fundraising events comes from ticket sales, if it's an event, as to from sponsorships. I might say that significant fundraising events require significant planning far in advance, 6 months to a year. And this is a really big point, financial consideration. Make sure that you have projected revenue to cover your expenses to make sure you're going to have a decent profit. Next slide, please. Earned revenue. This is another funding stream that is really not necessarily always handled in, it's usually handled in marketing departments, but you can sell merch on your website. You can, if you have a building that has a venue or a theater or something, or a big hall, you can rent your space to organizations that as a source of earned income. And you must be in line with your mission in order to avoid paying taxes on it, business income versus unrelated business income. Now, okay, so Danielle and I have given you an overview of the different sources of funding that can balance your plate. So how do you make it work? How do you pull it all together? You make a fundraising plan. One, you're going to want to define how you're going to raise that money. Think about your tactics with each source. How are you going to promote each initiative? You're going to assess and evaluate your tactics as you go throughout the year. What works? What didn't work? What are you going to try again this year? What didn't work? What are new trends that you want to try in the new year? And you want to obviously always look at your metrics, for example, your return on investment. Is each funding stream sustainable in the future? And you also want to consider the staff time and expense of running each funding stream. And in order to build reliable and recurrent donations, that's important too. With individuals, you want to devise tactics that, as Danielle said, that will help ensure repeat giving year after year. And for instance, with foundations, you want to make sure that you build multi-year foundation gifts if you can do that. So by building into recurring donations, it's really going to help reduce the amount of time you spend actively fundraising in the future. And of course, number 4, you always want to explore new possibilities. You want to brainstorm with your team members, get creative and explore other possible options. And brainstorming is a great way to look at new opportunities, and keep your organization's unique mission and vision in mind at all times. Again, as part of the plan, you want to analyze your potential outcome from each option that you're looking at, each strategy. You want to project how much money can realistically be raised from each source, but also consider, in addition to the money, it's also awareness raising. And just recognize that this, particularly with fundraising events, which may not always yield an enormous profit, but they're so important for getting the name of your organization out there and getting your brand recognized by the broader community. And finally, you want to assess and analyze and adjust. I've already mentioned that earlier. You want to track your data. You want to do a mid-year review and make adjustments, and you want to do an end-of-year review and make adjustments. Okay, tips and tricks. This is really true for across the board here. You want to keep your messaging consistent across all platforms. You want to be as personal as possible. And as Danielle also talked about, you want to share your success stories. That's the best way to get across what you're doing, is to share with people what's the impact of what you're doing. You want to be flexible, and you always want to continue researching online, webinars, colleagues, even getting together with people from other organizations. That's often a way to build new ideas and trends and see what other organizations are doing. I think that's our last slide there. And now we'd love to open it up to any questions and answers. This has been fun, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Meg. Thanks, Danielle. We have a question in the Q&A. Someone asked, what does the term alternative giving mean?
Where I'm trying to remember.
Alternative gifts. So
oh,
things other than
I
cash
see.
gifts.
Oh.
So like your planned giving, your gifts of stock, donor advised funds.
Danielle, you're a little muted. If I could ask you to go off mute, and Meg, you to mute yourself. Thank you. Could you answer that question again? Thank you so much.
Sorry about that. We're in the same room, so we're trying to figure out the echo. Alternative gifts options are typically things that are non-cash gifts, non-checks, checks, cash, those sort of things. So it would be like a planned giving, where somebody would add your organization to their will, to receive a bequest upon their passing, their donor advised funds, gifts of stock. I know that some organizations are accepting NFTs. So just other things that are not cash.
Great. And just a reminder, if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. I see two from Maisie in the chat, so I'll ask those. Regarding peer-to-peer fundraising, we have a very small development team. They have a very small development team, and are unable to reach out to every new donor with a personalized message like you described. What do you suggest as far as automating this process? Yeah,
that's definitely a challenge, and that is certainly where AI is a really huge benefit to the fundraising world. A lot of the benefits come in and help us automate that personalized touch. So it definitely depends on the software that you use to track that information, but really just, as something as simple as, a certain appeal or a tag or something to identify those donors, so that when you do create your communications, you can create a unique communication for them that is not necessarily individually personalized, but it's at least personalized enough that you're showing them that how they came to you. So it makes them feel like they do have that personal touch, and they're not just another, name in the land of your generic e-news or something like that.
Maisie had another question. If segmentation by amount is not enough anymore, then how should we be segmenting?
Yeah, so that is also definitely a challenge and something that can be addressed with AI. One of the things that I've been learning about and talking about with other fundraisers is how to do that. So traditionally, we've been segmenting donors based off of amount, which is usually a couple, data points such as their zip code. And now with the ability of AI and being able to track more data, instead of just one or two touch points for knowing how to segment your donors, you can update some of your back-end stuff on your website with Google Analytics 4 and other, sort of tracking devices, and incorporate that into your donor data to get information on thousands of touch points. So you can check out their behavior, such as, what are the organizations they're visiting, what websites they're visiting, what products they're getting. It's overwhelming to know that the amount of information that you can collect on an individual. And it's not necessarily that we can, invade somebody's privacy. It's just, the matter of statistics and collecting this information and then being able to segment on that. So I don't fully know the specifics on how to incorporate that, but that's just something to think about when you're thinking about, how do I personalize my communications? How do I optimize the technology that's available so that I do have that high touch sort of communication? I'm not saying that, right now amounts is not the way to do it. It's definitely been reliable for so many years. It's just there's a great opportunity to keep in mind when you're planning for the future. Oh, I can't hear you.
Thanks, Danielle. I don't see any more questions, but I'm gonna drop a couple links. The first one is my Calendly link. If you'd like to schedule a meeting with me to learn more about food rescue, or Food Rescue Hero. And then the second will be the link for conference registration. And then I've also, I don't know why that's not hyperlinking. And then also the link for next month's webinar. But please go ahead and ask any other questions, any additional questions. If you've thought of anything, we'll stay on for a few minutes. But if not, thank you so much for attending, and a huge thank you to both Meg and Danielle for presenting. I know that this is definitely a very important topic. Thanks, everyone.
Great being here. Thank you.